Bro, you could say the same thing to someone twice.
Yeah.
First with when they know you have a master's in something and then you don't.
Yeah.
And the first time they'd be like, maybe. And the second time they'd be like,
yeah. Of course, credentialism is, manifest.
And you need to have a certain level of self-esteem in order to call on anyone.
Yeah.
And that is also, in my opinion, a great signifier of whether or not you'll have taste.
Yeah.
Because that's the decider whether it's being thrust upon you or whether you have to be like, no, this is popular, it's actually kind of fucked.
Yeah. No, credentialism is like the lowest form of outsourcing taste, outsourcing culture, outsourcing opinion to somebody who you think has some more material based bullet points than you do.
Bro, I love seeing it. Bro, now giving me sadistic pleasure. I'm like you're literally telling on yourself, bro. Like I've identified you. I could pick you on a crowd of 1,000,000.
Yeah. Is that why you're wearing a U of T sweater today? So that the credentialist crowd know, hey, listen, man, I studied political science and U of T. I know my shit.
I'll even throw it in and I'll be like, yeah, you dirty fucks, like you listen to me now, huh?
Yeah.
And then you shouldn't. You shouldn't. This is the last reason you should listen to me. But you listen to me anyways because you're disgusting.
Perfect. So the main thing we're going to be talking about.
I'll be like, oh guys, you should listen to me. You should like Pak studies. I actually, in my O levels, I got a history distinction for the highest mark in Pakistan I actually did. I'll be like, you should listen to me because I didn't just I didn't just only read studies in O levels. I was the best at it, which is why, of course, I worship Ayub Khan now.
Yeah. Perfect. So what are we talking about today exactly?
Are we rolling?
Yeah, we're rolling.
Oh.
Yeah, we're rolling.
Okay.
Trinidad listening in.
Okay.
Yeah, we're rolling.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, mental health in modernity.
Yeah.
I think that's maybe a good way to get into it.
Yeah.
And then, particularly for the non-academic but academically and culturally inclined person, how do you navigate through these thickets of cold, depressive guilt culture or nauseating trad trends that cosplay as
something deeper than they actually are,
as the fragments or the remainders of great civilizations, whether it's Christianity, Islam, or whatever tradition.
Yeah.
Right? But it's the aesthetics completely hollowed out.
Yeah.
Without any of the ethics, as you would say.
Yeah.
As our boss from the burger shop has known to be saying.
Yeah.
But I say, how do you navigate this?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe first we get into
what's the issue with people's mental health today? What do you think?
I mean, this is...
First of all, you think there's a mental health crisis? Number
Absolutely.
1. Number 2, if you think there is, where is it coming from? And number 3, if it's coming from somewhere, what is the solution?
Bro, since I know everything, and I am a know-it-all, I'm going to answer all of this very definitively.
Okay.
No, but really, mainstream answer, and I think that people en masse diagnose this absolutely spot on, is that we do have a crisis of meaning.
Yeah.
And on the most fundamental level, my personal inclination is to say that it is a crisis of meaning.
Mm-hmm.
It is a crisis of faith masquerading as a crisis of meaning. Because in my opinion, that unless you have a spiritual attunement, unless you have some kind of faith-based awakening, you do not have a link to the transcendental.
Okay.
Which is the only thing that can imbibe you with enough meaning to carry you through this very challenging world.
This challenging rock. Okay. So you think that ultimately the key issue of mental health today in the world is that humanity suffers from a lack of transcendental belief, lack of spirituality, lack of belief in a religion or any type of connection with the metaphysical.
Bro, imagine being a passionate advocate of scientism, right?
Yeah.
Pure, unfeeling scientism. And then you hit a clear ceiling where you see all the technocrats and the institutions around you failing.
Yeah.
Right? You think that the people leading the charge against climate change are going to fix the world, but then you see 10, 20 years later that it's all either alarmism that never comes to be, or 5 degrees in 3 years doesn't happen.
Yeah.
That famous Ehrlich bet where he said that in 30 years the earth will run out of all its resources. Always wrong. And on the other hand, you've got complete denial.
Yeah.
Where they say it's not a problem at all.
Yeah.
And the common man who has, who even wants to believe and understand the science, he really doesn't know what to think.
Yeah.
Right? There is clearly some problem, but how do you conceptualize it without being a specialist when all the specialists are clearly, not really hitting the nail on the head?
Yeah.
Economists around the world, crisis after crisis, credit crisis, boom and bust cycle. You're stuck in a seemingly endless loop. And the elders, the archons that are supposed to know how to handle these massive crises, and they're supposed to guide you through this new secular world, which is a world where you're not worried about your spiritual health, you're worried about overpopulation. You're not worried about, the individual transcending. You're worried about climate change. They completely reformulated the nodes of what it meant to have a meaningful life. They invested that libido into these very worldly problems and are in real time failing to tackle any of them. And in fact, they're showing us in real time that whether this is the international monetary system, whether it's our trade mechanics of the day, whether it's our approach to speeding up or handling or regulating AI, overpopulation, anything, we're fundamentally lost as a society. And that the transcendental is something that we're in constant denial of. And even those people who are returning to these, as you say, new age, woo-woo kind of practices in order to gain some sort of spirituality, that trend is encouraging. But until that's played out on a civilizational level, you're not going to reformulate the axioms of the society and what a meaningful life for that society is. And until you do that, you're going to be stuck in the endless loop of state capitalism.
We need to rediscover the why behind what we do. Absolutely. In a lot of ways. Absolutely. Not just on an individual level, but on a collective level. Like, what purpose does science serve? Science has to serve a purpose, right? There has to be a meaning why that we are innovating and developing all these new things. In some ways, it has to be in the goals of bettering humanity, into goals of bettering human material conditions. And if you look at like the predecessor to science, which is alchemy, alchemy was a deeply philosophical and ethical subject, because the point of alchemy in a lot of ways was that how can we make gold out of lead? Now this is a chemical question, but the underlying thing behind alchemy was how can we create the ultimate code in order to unlock all the knowledge in the world? How can we make matter transcend itself? How can we turn lead into gold? That's what it was.
Matter transcending itself.
Matter transcending itself. What is the skeleton key that will unlock the secrets of the universe, the code of the creator, and that for us? And that entire why was the why behind alchemy. And that is what captured the spirit of early stage science. Why? Figure out this knowledge, to figure out these truths in order to better humanity as a whole.
Alchemy always had, it was considered a science at the time, but it was not devoid of the mystical, of the religious, the way modern science is. There was some level of union there. And in that sense, you could draw a very solid parallel to say that lead turning into gold, which is something that transcends other regular matter, is analogous to the human being transmuting itself,
transcending itself, overcoming itself.
Exactly.
There's a huge metaphor at play over here. Like the goal of alchemy was to find the philosopher's stone. The philosopher's stone is essentially this stone which carries the code, the universal code. It's that how can we unlock immortality through this knowledge? How can we crack the code of the world itself? And this deeply mythological question is what leads to the advent of science and leads to the advent of all these creation. There's a deep ethical aspect of science that a lot of people miss, and a lot of the modern world miss. I don't think this is the case as much anymore. If you look at like the top tech players in the world, they are, I think, deeply motivated by some ethical questions.
100%.
Like, even if you look at AI, right? Even if you look at a guy like Elon Musk is asking deep existential mythological questions that humanity cares about. You know, this isn't some esoteric wild shit we're talking about. How can we use Neuralink to cure people's disabilities? How can we conquer the cosmos so that humanity doesn't have to deal with its resource restrictions anymore? All of these, in some way, shape, or form, are analogous to the philosopher's stone. How can we solve these problems of finite matter through infinity? That is the basis of science. That is the basis of technology. That is the basis of all of these things. But when we divorce ourselves from these deeply ethical questions, we end up in a bit of a nihilistic state where we can't separate the matter at hand, what is happening, with why is it happening? What is the deeper ethical reason? What is the transcendental behind it?
Which would say be analogous to the kind of cancerous late-stage capitalist approach to aimlessly, through credit expansion,
produce
GDP maxing, just producing, without any stated categorical transcendent end. Let's not even say moral, let's say transcendent end. Right? And I say transcendent in particular, just to minutely differentiate from the boohoo you talked about, a billionaire crowd. It doesn't matter whether you like Elon Musk or Peter Thiel. Right? I have endless criticisms for these people. Right? And they even, to some point, they turn me conservative at some points with just how breakneckly progressive they are in terms of their tech. Right? But are they thinking along transcendental post-civilizational lines? Absolutely. That aspiration, that ambition of transcending humanity is there. You might say that, oh, that's that this is the locus of the Antichrist, right? And that they're transcending humanity in a negative way, right? And that transhuman maybe is inevitable, but post-human shouldn't be. But again, you can't run away from the fundamental logic that they're asking those transcendental questions
and trying to solve those transcendental questions.
If you have such a f***ing issue with it, come up with your own framework. Don't bitch and moan about it. And you should. I want to come up with our own framework. There should be a civilizational answer of, say, the East or the Muslim world to that framework. Not just saying, like, like any self-help book will tell you that the worst person in the room is someone who raises an objection but doesn't propose a solution. So stop just raising objections, also propose a solution.
It's very easy to criticize something. It's very easy to take faults out in something. It's very difficult to create.
And just because we're saying Elon Musk is a generational mind, bro, there's so much discourse. Elon Musk is actually very stupid. He was just here because he had one success.
He was lucky.
And then he had another success. And then he had a fourth success. And it's like, bro, you don't have to like him. To acknowledge that he is a generational mind. Does he have flaws in his intelligence? I'm sure he does. Who doesn't? But it's like, you're looking.
He's trying to answer transcendental questions, whether you like it or not.
Someone is in real time shaping the fate of the most important government in the world. Right? Whether it's through Doge or his Doge or his space-based adventures or Neuralink or whatever. Right? And if any of these succeed, or even Starlink is revolutionary in its own right. If any of these technologies succeed, they will be replicated at a mass scale all over the world. Is very consequential.
They can literally liberate humanity in a lot of ways if they work out right.
I don't know about that. I'm staying agnostic about that for the
They could. I'm not saying they could enslave us as well. Depending on whose hands these technologies fall into.
Exactly.
But they could liberate us.
The power of those technologies is undeniable.
Yeah.
And how small are you? How egoistic are you? What is this narcissistic tendency to make everything about whether you like it or not?
Yeah.
The civilizational power of something is undeniable.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry if you're not a political animal.
If you have a problem with these guys today, then you should have had a problem with the alchemists. You should have had a problem with Isaac Newton. You should have had a problem with Galileo. You should have had a problem with all of these innovative minds who changed the way we think and we approach the physical material world.
There is no doubt. Look, I don't know if I necessarily agree with that.
Yeah.
Okay. Because for me, one is mapping the world and one is actively changing it. Or maybe I don't even know if that's the right distinction. Honestly, maybe I just don't have an opinion about that right now. And I don't maybe. But the problem at hand is still, it's like, buddy, it's not about you.
Yeah.
Right? It is about humanity, the world at large. Call it what you want. And contribute something meaningful.
Yeah.
If anything, again, this is an axiom as old as time, but the narcissists just don't understand this. It's like, take the good and leave the bad.
The thing is that in a lot of ways, I understand their position as well, because a lot of times you can't have the good without the bad. Now, why I give an example of these scientists who came up with all these incredible physics theories and chemistry theories and whatnot, right? Have those theories and that knowledge been used for destruction? Yes, they have.
Yeah.
We've created bombs, we've created nuclear bombs, we've created killing machines. But have they also been en masse used to better humanity? Yes. This is the paradox of knowledge. This is the catch-22 of knowledge. This is the creative destruction that knowledge brings you. You know, you don't bemoan Einstein or all of these characters for the Promethean gift they gave you. This just comes with the territory, man. Will these things be used for negative at times? They will, but this is part of the human history. This is part of the human story. We have to go through this stuff.
And even if you take and I'm sure you can expand on
more. This is not my idea. Hegel talked about an idea similar to this. Thesis, antithesis, synthesis. Jung has talked about this idea in certain ways with the Aquarian ages and all the catch-22s that come with them.
No, but this binary specifically of knowledge.
Yeah.
Take it back to how, and maybe this is a Christian Gnostic split, and maybe you can elaborate on this more.
Yeah.
But viewing the fall from paradise, which was caused by knowledge after eating the apple, the divergent views on whether that knowledge was a gift or a curse is again that original binary on how you view knowledge.
But there's no direct answer to this.
Exactly.
Right? The thing is that you have to hold the paradox in your head. You need to be, in a lot of ways, crucified by the contradictions of the question. Is knowledge the Promethean gift or is it the destruction? It is both things, but you have to hold that.
And the answer is just one.
Yeah.
Which the naysayers and the boohoo crowd will never understand.
Yeah.
The answer is just one, and that answer is action. That answer is doing something about it. That answer is that there is no godly real world validation, right? In this world, even as a believer, I know I'm left to my own devices, that I can seek answers through scripture and then make my best bet and do my best to reach what the truth or what the good is.
Yeah.
Right? But there's no one coming down to me in person and saying you're doing the right thing. I'm simply doing my best with knowledge to navigate through this is good, this is bad, and then my action is the only synthesizing real meaningful factor.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah. We went off on a bit of a tangent here. Let's come back down to earth for a second. Mental health. So what's the issue with mental health today?
Man, I actually, despite the fact that in my teens I was a Milton Friedman, Thomas Sowell, Rand Paul afflicted kind of, not pure free marketeer, but very pro-business. kind of guy, I think that the left's analysis of late stage capitalism engendering a kind of quiet, bubbling under the surface kind of mass hysteria, or being a pressure cooker, which is
tearing our
just not
psyches
bursting.
apart.
It's slowly shredding people under its massive weight. So I like that late stage capitalism analysis where it's like, okay, there seems to be nothing transcendental about what we're aiming for anymore.
Yeah.
Everything is expansion of capital, cog in the machine, get a good job. Even the most...
Get a nice vacation, get a nice car, go to the country club.
And the whole trad wife, traditional male thing as well.
Yeah, this is just a recreation, it's hollow.
Bro,
it's hollow as hell. It's basically, it's trying to... It's not that your lifestyle can actually ever be like that. It's voyeurism at its finest. It's just fantasizing about a life that never existed and never will exist for you as some sort of escape. It's escapism, you know, to find yourself in these. I'm trad now. You know what I mean? I'm gonna outsource my personality to the algorithm based upon what my brain is craving. I want a sense of stability and placement. So now I'm gonna go trad. I want a sense of rebellion and dissident. So now I'm going to, become a neo-reactionary. It's all of these things, you know what I mean? But they're fundamentally divorced from a transcendental meaning.
But take the emerging trad wife archetype for women and like the red pill guy, ultra masculine red pill guy for men. And it's like, sure, there's certain things. At first, when I look at both of them as someone who's relatively traditional, I say, oh, there's value in this and there's value in that.
Yeah.
But what they're doing is they're taking the most superficial elements of being a woman, the most superficial elements of being a man, and how they both interact and how male and female dynamics have always interacted. They take the most superficial elements and they reduce it to, I want a provider man. I want a woman who cooks for me. It's like, bro, like there is nothing transcendental about that. In fact, it's as base,
it's as materialistic, it's as base, it's as superficial as it gets.
Animal lizard brain as it gets. It's like fulfill like my sexual needs and you like buy me things so that I stand above the other females in the hypersexualized marketplace. It's like, bro, that's literally all it is.
Absolutely.
It's not connected to anything.
It's not connected to anything greater. It's not connected to anything transcendental. Unlike the archetypes that you are somewhat venerating behind these movements. Now, the issue with these things ultimately comes down to, if you ask me, right, it's a sense of people are begging for a yes and no. They're begging for a black and white. Tell me this is the right path, Momi. Tell me this is the right way of conducting my life. People are not willing to hold that contradiction in their head where it's both paths can be right. 3, 4, 5 paths can be right. You know what I mean? There's no such thing. I mean, it's like the most or the pseudo thing.
Have a unique
it's the most pseudo thing to say, but in a lot of ways, there's no such thing as a black and white answer to any of these things.
Remember, we were talking
You've got to hold all of these contradictions in your brain and come up with your own thing.
Remember,
no subculture, no niche, no internet weird movement is going to fulfill that void in your heart.
And there's like a bell curve to it. And I'll take Andrew Tate as the example.
Yeah.
Okay. It's like the 50 IQ hatred where you're like, oh, he's misogynistic and this and that.
Yeah.
Then there's the midwits analysis, which is like, no, it's actually more complicated than that. There's a black and a white, and he teaches people some good things. Most of the misogynistic stuff is a joke. And then I think is a real take, where it's like, even the good things are ultimately delinked, in my opinion, from meaning. Like, if your entire shtick is buy a supercar and get girls, right?
Yeah.
Become a, again, that like biology-based misconstrual of hierarchies that Jordan Peterson used to talk about.
Yeah.
Where this guy is essentially saying that the only way to success is being like the top alpha male in the sexual marketplace.
Yeah.
And it's like, buddy, they're like, again, I'm not saying there isn't truth to that, right?
The transcendental thing behind this entire reasoning is lost. And the transcendental reasoning behind all of this is that, hey, you know, get a Bugatti, you know, be the top alpha dog. The actual transcendental thing behind all of this is overcome yourself, overcome one's own limitation, be a better human being compared to who you were yesterday. And that's the actual transcendental thing. But
the manosphere guys, the manosphere guys, I'm not gonna, people will say, like, you know, you're not giving them the due. The manosphere guys have an element of that. They say it. The ultimate manifestation is too enmeshed with the purely material, I don't know if worldly is the way to describe it. But this normie impression of what a great man is.
It's just a checklist of status symbols. It's like, I drive a nice car, I have a nice house, I have a attractive partner, so I've hit the checklist. You know, I go for a nice vacation twice a year. You know what I mean? I fly business class. So you hit a
like
checklist.
Fast food or like TV dinner version of answer to, like, I don't know what to become.
See, it's answering actually, like, here's the thing with those guys, there's a reason to give them their credit and to give all of these things their credit, right? They're actually tapping into deep questions that we care about. There's a reason why these people have audiences, be it your red pill crowd, be it your girl boss crowd. They're asking important mythological questions. It's just that their answers are f***ing wrong. Not because it's materially disprovable that, hey, maybe some of the material diagnosis that they're giving might be true. It's not about that, but it's because of the fact that they are decoupled from the transcendental. That's where it fucks up. And that fuck up cannot be understated. Because when you disconnect the material from the spiritual, that's when nihilism really starts. That's where late stage capitalism, that's where all of these things that go wrong, this chaotic world where nothing means anything, it's just a competition of consumption. That's where gooner consumerism, that's what I call it.
And it's
a gooner consumerism.
In Pakistanis and internationally, all the creators who do like fucking family vlogging and like, oh, we're a couple and we went to, like, I don't know, fucking New Zealand and made it. And that's the be all end all. We emigrated. Wow, we got this passport. And it's like, I'm not knocking you guys. I'm happy for you. You've achieved a goal and that's awesome. But something about the excessive showing off of a lifestyle or a particular brand of achievement kind of, you know, it makes me feel like there's something fishy behind it. Right?
If you're begging the crowd to tell you, hey, listen, can you recognize I've made it, right? It's outsourcing the transcendental to the society.
And there's an element there which is positive, which is like you're inspiring other people to do the same. Which is again a positive thing. I'm not knocking them.
There's nothing we're vilifying in all of this. We're just diagnosing the phenomena.
But there's a point at which it crosses over into vanity. And it crosses over into that conspicuous consumption, endless cycle of non-transcendental
status signaling.
And, you know, ultimately, and, you know, maybe this is also my bias as someone who has a faith-based approach to these things. But it's like, once you take that transcendental or God or whoever your comfort is, you know, it's like, okay, I've achieved this, now what's next?
It's just gooner consumerism. It's the next best thing. I bought a Rolex, so now I'm going to buy an AP. So now I'm going to buy a Patek. So now I'm going to buy a Richard Mille. So what's next? What do you do? You're never happy with enough material possessions. You know what I mean? And this isn't like any type of indictment on any product or materialism. Like all of us can enjoy it a little bit.
100%.
You know what I mean? It's not. I'm not like some sort of death cult platonic doomer who's like the only life worth living is the life of forms. I'm not saying that, but I am saying that when you don't keep some elements of that line of thinking in your approach, you will descend into nihilism, hedonistic nihilism, which is just about consuming. You become the Nietzschean last man in a lot of ways, you know? The man whose entire life is consumed by his comfort and his entertainment and all these things. And it's not to take away from the effort you might have placed, you might have put in to achieve those things.
That's admirable in its own right.
Admirable. That there is a transcendent characteristic about the work you put in to achieve those things. Don't get me wrong, I'm not knocking that. But the way you want to spend that vital energy is the wrong way.
Agreed.
Don't base that vital energy, that vitality of everything you have done down to, hey man, I'm going to move into a bigger house. It means more than that. The journey, the suffering, the effort, the self-growth, it means more than just a nice watch or a nice car or a nice house. It means way more than that.
You know, I think I went through this phase, me in particular, when I was living alone.
Yeah.
I loved getting nice clothes.
Yeah.
Right? And for a good 2 years or more, that was something that was always in the back of my mind.
Yeah.
While I was in uni.
Yeah.
And after a while, I was like, yo, I need to snap out of this cycle.
Yeah.
Like, in my mind, you know, it's really, and bro, it's so easy to trick yourself, man.
Yeah.
And people, like, no one likes feeling like an idiot, but we're all idiots sometimes. And I was being an idiot then. Like, and it's so easy to convince yourself that, oh no, this is just a passion I have on the side.
Yeah.
But clearly, I've crossed all reasonable limits for it a while ago.
Yeah.
And I'm just still going in on it.
Yeah.
Right? And the moment a habit stops feeding something meaningful about you, it's kind of, it's digressed or diverged into being, I don't know if addiction is the right word, but a bad habit at least.
I think it's just outsourcing one's personality, outsourcing oneself of self to
or shifting the
material
locus of validation from inside yourself to maybe externalizing it.
Yeah.
Which is not always a great thing.
So these are en masse like the problems that the modern world, the modern people in the world deal with.
You know, in Pakistan, I'll say this.
Yeah.
In my eyes, and again, you know, people get mad at Hope Course sometimes, but I really do think that the average Pakistani at least aspires towards an image of a hard-working, family-oriented, God-fearing, decent image of what a person, a man or woman, should be.
Yeah.
Right? And that manifests in our culture as well. In the way we dress, there's a certain conservatism about it in the popular media, and there's all of those things. And there's that persona, there's that mask, there's that outward presentation, that impression of what a decent Pakistani should be. And that's a good thing. You should have unified markers of what makes a decent person in society. I think that's valuable. But that can't be a substitution for your personal journey into meaning.
Yeah.
Right? Just because I dress in the most respectable way, and that's perhaps a marker for women, right? Or just
even for men, based upon our last episode, huh?
Yeah. Or like you can't wear shorts and things like that.
Yeah.
Say you dress respectably, you speak the right way, you check all of the basic average Pakistanis ideas outwardly of what a decent person is. You're fasting, you're doing all the basic stuff.
Yeah.
Right? Those are very important things. But they're not a substitute for your lifelong journey and your dialectic with yourself, with your faith, with your creator, however you want to conceptualize.
The inner war you wage every day with the contradictions in your brain.
And what a privilege to actually, for everyone to have a story. For everyone, whether it's the fucking prime minister of the country, whether it's a billionaire, down to someone who like is a cleaner or does something that's not considered to be a high status job.
It should be a mythos to everyone's life.
Bro, 100%.
Everyone should be the main character in their own story.
And we always talk about, we talked about this before, we're like, oh, there's like there's an Aam Aadmi problem.
Yeah.
That is the common man in our country and around the world. Say someone whose only function is to stand in a Sarkari office all day and open and close a door for an important man.
Yeah, he deserves an arc as well. And he should believe in his arc.
Bro, everyone has an arc.
Yeah.
And, you're like, okay, to you, he might be someone jo bechara darwaza khol band karta hai.
Yeah.
Right? But, remember that passage I read to you from Borges once?
Yeah.
Which talks of a random, malang, strange man in Europe who dies, and he's the last witness to the Roman Empire. And what he's trying to say is that yes, this guy was a random malang off the streets, but with him died the impression of something great. Now, not everyone has a privilege of taking the last vestiges of the Roman Empire with them, but what does everyone have? most people have families, right?
Yeah.
If you have
Most people have ambitions.
Bro, if you have
Most people have goals and dreams.
I would say that, ambition mein hum jate hain na, I'm not disagreeing with you, but often it's misconstrued to be linked to, say, the capitalistic.
Yeah. I don't mean it in that sense.
I'm saying it, the safest example for what I'm trying to say is the family. Kyunki, bro, maa baap sabke hote hain, so almost sabke hote hain. Everyone has a family, a mother, a father, a sister. Just because someone else has them too, doesn't make them any less valuable to you.
Yeah, of course.
Right? Just because everyone has a hometown, right? No matter what happens, I'm always going to say Karachi is my favorite. No matter what logic I'm presented with, my parents will always be the best parents. My siblings will always be the best siblings.
Yeah.
And it should be like that. And that implotment, that story, that arc that everyone has, ultimately, your lived experience is your lived experience.
Yeah.
That element of possession imparts a level of meaning to everyone's life.
Yeah.
And when you realize that, and when everyone realizes that, and I'm not going into the hyper individualistic, you're the main character, cut everyone off kind of, but that everyone, and this is like, burger shop hope core, but like all of you deserve that arc.
Yeah, absolutely. So how are we tackling the mental health issues?
Firstly, by recognizing that
antidepressants and therapy.
My God, dude, this is the scariest part. Growing up, I was always quite skeptical of the kind of therapy we have institutionalized, especially in Pakistan. And my friends would be like, "Oh, are you not do you not acknowledge and mental health?" And I was like, "No."
No, mental health problems are there. There's no denying any of those.
There is no reasonable person would deny it. But I can observe, even as a non-professional, that this mantra of acknowledge that mental health is important has some inbuilt trapdoors, because it seems that the societies that most acknowledge mental health are also having the deepest crises.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know exactly why that is.
Could it be a problem of abundance, where the lack of need to survive on a daily basis leads to a sort of nihilism? Because if you look at it in less fortunate countries, it's like everyone has a meaning. That meaning is that I need to have food on the table tomorrow. I need to be able to survive my day to day. But when you are not pressed with these existential challenges on a daily basis, do you lose meaning in some way? Do you become nihilistic to a certain degree? Because a lot of the mental health crises, right, it's no surprise it happens in richer countries, and it happens to richer people in a lot of ways.
I 100% agree
but there's a lack of meaning in a lot of people's things.
1000% agree. But I think before we approach the solution, we need to deepen the question even further.
Yeah.
Because, again, there's so many resources to the point that in a lot of developed countries, you've got publicly facilitated access to therapists, right, to psychiatrists. And all those countries are heading in the worst directions. So just figuring out that axiom in particular of, acknowledging mental health is enough, I think there's a kind of depth there, in the sense that there's a lot of research about how ruminating on oneself is not a good thing. So the more you just thinking about oneself, centering oneself in a narcissistic way, as in a solipsistic way, where the man is an island, and you suddenly exist outside of what you do for others and what you mean for others, right? I think that could drive even a mentally healthy person insane. That could, if you start over...
To some degree, I agree with you that there's a narcissistic element of it that cannot be healthy, but this idea of removing yourself from a greater collective, I think you could probably find...
No, it's not the same as the individuation.
No, I'm not talking about individuation. I think that if you're going to point towards research that supports that this is unhealthy, you could easily find research that supports it as healthy. And from my own anecdotal experience, sometimes framing yourself in a solipsistic way, like I'm removed from a collective, not not infinitely,
it's not
but to
saying-
some degree,
same thing.
to some degree, viewing yourself in those light,
Let me
there's
clarify.
something healthy about that as well.
Let me clarify.
Like, who am I if I am not Arbaz the son, Arbaz the brother, Arbaz the husband? Who am I stripped of all of these things? That's also a useful mental exercise in a lot of ways.
Sure. No, I agree with that characterization, but that's not what I'm trying to say.
Okay.
And what I'm trying to explain is kind of difficult, but I'll do my best. It's not you removing yourself from an immediate collective. Even when you do that at any psychological level, the basic subject-object relationship of the observant and the observed, right? Whether you're just doing that on an archetypal level, where you're viewing yourself from the outside, from the perspective of an elder or of a romantic partner, because that is inevitably how people view themselves.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
So I'm saying in that complete abstraction, right? Human beings always need to acknowledge that, we're still living as a node within some system.
Yeah.
Not the system. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. Okay, I don't disagree
and
with
that kind of rumination, in my opinion, leads to the hyper-individualistic therapy speak culture that we see online today, which is like, cut that bitch off. Don't make any effort, right? That is not the same as what you're saying, which is like, conceptualize yourself free of communal restraints. That's a positive direction.
Yeah.
And that's
what I was good to clarify that, yeah.
Right.
So cut that bitch off. What does that mean?
Man, okay, I'll give you an example.
Uh-huh.
Okay. A couple of years ago, a good friend of mine was really frustrated in the romantic relationship that he was in. And he called me really angry one day and he's like, man, I have these problems and I don't think she's being fair to me. And I don't know if I can do this anymore. And I was like, brother, this is like the best thing that's ever happened to you. Like, don't mess it up. What are you mad about?
Yeah.
And then he tells me, and I'm like, these supposed burdens that you're talking about. And it was basic things like, give me more time. And like the stuff that happens in like a relationship. I was like, bro, they were thinking about getting married. They were meant to get married soon. And he was like, dude, I don't know if I can do this. I was, dude, get your act together, man.
Yeah.
This is what life is like.
Yeah, it's difficult.
It's meant to be that way.
Yeah.
Right? And unless it's something really unreasonable, that you don't just cut that person off.
Yeah.
Right? So, and then you extrapolate this further. The most common thing is people, bro, there are a lot of people who are constantly shifting friend groups, right? Matlab 15 saal ho gaye hain. And look, I'm not saying that some of you can't be unlucky, right?
Yeah.
Maybe you truly were in toxic environments, but chances are, if every year you're with a different outfit of people, you might have some role to play in that.
Yeah.
If you can't keep lifelong relationships, long relationships, then it should not
be some introspection that has to be done in that situation.
There can't be some... You can't be offended when someone comes and says to you that, listen, maybe there's an element of you that causes these kinds of patterns, right? And then, but no one likes realizing these things. And this is the funny thing about, personality flaws that all of us have. It's like, there's so many things about us that everyone will be aware of except us.
For us. Yeah.
And the moment it hits you and you clock it, first you might be in denial and then you accept it, and it's not a nice feeling. Because specifically, often a lot of the stuff that is wrong with you is also what irritates you about others, right?
Projection,
So when someone shows you that mirror and you realize, man, I actually do this thing that really pisses me off.
Yeah.
It's pretty annoying.
Yeah.
Right? But then you kind of have to figure it out. And it's like, dude, if, every year you're like to some new people, man, those people were so toxic,
But it's like you gotta see where you're going wrong.
It's the hardest thing in the world, man.
And how does modern culture approach people who have these dilemmas? That I need to get a new friends group every day.
Endless validation.
Endless validation. That's the problem. What do you mean by endless validation?
I'll give our own example. Okay, I'll tell you an issue I've always had and that I've tried to fix. I think that I have always had, and to some extent still have, an issue of just yapping.
Yeah.
And having a one-sided conversation at times.
Yeah.
Or just going on endlessly without realizing that I've been talking for like 3 minutes at someone.
Yeah.
Right? And in the early days when we were recording, you had the decency to, in a very nice way, point that out to me.
Yeah.
Right? And at that point, I kind of realized that I had the problem. So I wasn't particularly offended by it.
Yeah.
And I think that literally, from that moment that you said that to me, I think my performance on the podcast has significantly improved.
I agree with you. Yeah. I 100% agree with you. Absolutely.
And it's unpleasant to acknowledge that you have that problem because you never, and that's something you should know me about.
A lot of people can't differentiate between, hey, listen, what is malignant and what is criticism, you know, and who should I take criticism from and who should I not take criticism from. Like a rule of thumb I follow is that I'm not going to take criticism from anyone I wouldn't take advice from. So if I wouldn't come to you and ask you, hey man, give me advice on something, I'm probably not going to take your criticism, you know. And when you expose yourself to enough of this stuff, which we have been recently, if you've seen our comment section, we can tell when somebody's in a good faith disagreeing with us and criticizing us, and we can tell when somebody's just being mean because for no reason. So people's reluctance to expose themselves to criticism really makes them blind, because you need to kind of expose yourself to these things, expose yourself to the discomforts of kind of being insulted at times, to really be able to tell the difference between this is a slight and this is not. You know, you can't ever not be offended. You got to be able to, like, you know,
bro, absolutely,
keep yourself open to, hey, listen, man, why don't you shit on me a little bit? Why don't you make fun of me a little bit? Why don't you tell me where I'm genuinely going wrong a little bit? All of these things are linked. And the more you kind of come in contact with all of these things, the better you'll be able to self-correct, and the better you'll be able to tell the difference between, hey, that's in good faith and hey, that's not in good faith. I know what you're playing at over here, you know?
Okay, if you take the internet now, take the kind of interactions we get on the burger shop.
Yeah.
For me, it's like the third best. Or, okay, for me, it's like when someone praises us, it's nice.
Yeah.
When someone criticizes us in a deep way and has something to say, that's the best, right? And then there's a category of people where it's like, dude, you know we're not going to go through these hundreds of comments.
Yeah.
We're not going to feel bad or stop making content just because, like, you know, you, like, abused us in the comments. And it's like, dude, if you're going in anyone's comment section and just passive-aggressively virtue signaling or swearing, it's like there are clearly some demons that haunt you.
Yeah.
And my friend, it's not the burger shop. They're like,
yeah,
it's not the burger shop.
I'm not the boogeyman.
To bring it back, what we've been diagnosing is this institutionally imposed, facilitated crisis of mental health.
Yeah.
Because on the one hand, you've got your governments, financial institutions, cultural institutions, which all point you towards a vision of success, which is for most unachievable.
Conspicuous consumption.
Conspicuous consumption, you know, this endless...
Lining up the social totem pole through materialism.
So you've got this largely unachievable, and even if you achieve it, unrewarding vision of, you know, and where everyone feels like an underachiever. You can see this in, like, there's this
rich
poll...
people, man, they also feel like underachievers. It's like, yeah, I'm fucking rich, but my neighbor had a better house.
And there's no end to that.
Yeah.
There will always be someone richer than you unless you're literally like Jeff Bezos.
Yeah, right? No, then even Elon Musk and Larry Page.
Yeah, someone will overtake you.
They're more.
And, like, you know, these lopsided expectations.
Yeah.
There was this poll I was reading recently. It was out of the US, but it was what Gen Z women considered to be respectable salaries for a partner.
Yeah.
And for the millennials, boomers, everything is showed like, you know, $70,000, $90,000, $100,000. And the one for Gen Z was like, oh, we consider $500,000 or $600,000 to be rich.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair to them, they've grown up in this environment where inflation is so fucking rampant. Like, you want to get a bunch of like normal groceries for a day. It's like,
you know, but
70 pounds or something for
the real reason.
You know
I mean, sure, but that doesn't justify a 6x jump. In my opinion, the thing that justifies a 6x jump in their minds is this.
It's status signaling.
Social media, whatever, this entire environment.
Status signaling. I agree with you.
Yeah. So you've got this entire this is a playbook for an institutionalized mass mental health crisis.
Yeah.
Like, you cannot get out of this well unless you're somewhat apathetic or detached or transcending this.
Yeah.
And then, on the other hand, you've got the mental health complex, which is also institutionalized.
And pharma.
And big pharma. And big pharma. So you've got this entire psychological and psychiatrical mental health complex on the other side, which promises you a cure-all or some betterment. But in the countries where it's most present, people seem to be doing the worst. Right? So it is a collaboration of these institutions where some people might consider them culturally distinct. Some people might consider the economic complex to be right-wing and the mental health complex to be left-wing, but it's like...
But on a greater level, they're both one and the same, where they give you a problem and then they sell you a solution.
They're feeding off of each other in real time. Right? One would not exist with the same viciousness as it does if the other didn't.
Absolutely.
Right? So now you say that all of the technocrats, all of the archons, all of the people who are supposed to have answers to my civilization, they don't know. Their guess is as good as mine.
And just to clarify, we don't think that, at least I don't think that there's some sort of conspiracy of like cabal elites who are sitting up and plotting on humanity's downfall. I really don't think. I really think that, these are just the natural directions that things were bound to flow in, given the choices that we've made for the past 200 years, No choices without consequence. I reject this notion that, there's some sort of like actual physical uniparty. There's the uniparty idea. There's an ideology behind these things, and all of us are intentional or unintentional actors that are benefiting this superstructure. That's how I actually see it. So this isn't even like us saying that, I think Peter Thiel is evil or Peter Thiel is the good guy. Like, it's not about that. I think what we're kind of getting at more is that there's a superstructure that all of us are subscribing to, and even the greatest, most complex people in the world are subservient to this ideological superstructure that we govern ourselves.
Yeah, I don't necessarily disagree with that at all. Yeah. No.
And that's what makes it so fucking powerful. It's because there are no people behind all of this. And this, once again...
The Landian techno-capital.
Yeah. It's Landian techno-capital in a lot of ways. And this is, again, where that black and white thinking comes in. It's like our desire to have answers. So what we're going to do, we're going to blame this group of people and say that, hey man, it's their fault that we're doing this. It's the Illuminati's fault. It's the Freemasons' fault. It's all of X, Y, Z. It's a new person's fault every other day. But this kind of misses the forest from the trees. It is all of our problem, because this ideological superstructure has co-opted us for its own goals. Be that the institutions, be that you or me.
And when the superstructure, whether autonomous or semi-autonomous, fails, whether the welter of institutions inside, that are, they're supposed to be the adult in the room. They're supposed to be the ones with answers or at least some direction. And when a mass realization sets in that these people, one, may not have your best interests at heart, and two, even if they did, don't have all the answers. Is when
they don't know.
They don't know.
Don't assign malice where ignorance is a much better answer.
So, when you reach that stage of uncertainty, the answer is to be found within. The answer is to be found in, whether you want to call it some level of apathy, detachment, transcendence, hermit maxing, whatever. But there is a long, drawn-out battle inside yourself that you have been outsourcing to the world, to these institutions, to fight for you, because you're like reels maxing all day, and you're afraid that a single thought may enter your head, and you may have to contest your shadow, because you're afraid of that. You're like, you know what? I'm gonna head straight to therapy. I'm gonna head straight to this creator, that creator, and not have that dialogue.
The benefit of the doubt, right? I don't think most people have even had the opportunity or the chance or a gateway to be exposed to a third path. So some people, definitely there's escapism in a lot of things that people do, but I think some people, especially because of work requirements and wage slavery and all these other things, they don't even have time and the freedom and the luxury to even think about the third path. And the third
That's where the economic complex comes in, which we were talking about. This first enslaved you.
Yeah.
Right? You don't have enough hours in a day to find yourself. You don't have enough hours in a day to be really politically attuned.
Yeah. So the third path presented, though, then that we are alluding to is Carl Jung's psychology, Carl Jung's philosophy.
And so this is what's unique about this. I just want to, just to add some texture to that, is people take the third path as, oh, I'm the ideologically homeless, heterodox, Joe Rogan type,
No.
It's like, no, we're not talking about another distinct group somewhere in the middle that you should enter.
Yeah,
it's literally the opposite of it.
Yeah, like I'm like explicitly anti-political when it comes to this stuff.
So, or maybe a better word to use would be you're anti-partisan. In the sense that, obviously there's a political element whether we like it or not, but you're not someone who's picking sides, right? You're not saying, oh, you know what? I don't like this establishment and that establishment, so I'm going to go to the third emerging establishment.
The thing is that Jungian individuation transcends politics and transcends society politics. It's about what's within. I'm not negotiating with any third, fourth, fifth party for what's within. That's under my sovereignty. So in a way, it is anti-politics because it doesn't rely on the exoteric, it relies on the esoteric.
You're essentially saying that, first path, no. Second path, no. And the third path is not just some outsourced collective, it's your path.
It's your path. It's your bespoke, your own. It's you being the main character in your own life. It's your own mythos.
And it has no end in sight, and there is no defined destination.
Yeah.
It is this endless rhythm of self-discovery.
Yeah. And for anyone who wants straightforward answers, it is an endless well of meaning. It is an endless well of jubilation. It is an endless well of transcending. So trust me, this is the real shit, boys.
And before all of those things come to you, it is the daily confrontation with chaos. Right? It is embracing the fact that not only do the adults around you, whether it's your parents or your teachers, or the institutions, which are your governments and your technocrats, none of these people have the answer.
Yeah.
And in fact, we also don't have the answer.
We don't have the answer. We're trying to find our own.
We and the self in the immediate moment does not have the answers.
Yeah.
And embracing that is the first step to engaging in Jung's idea of individuation, which is very simply put, the long-term process of
becoming who you really are.
Defining your
becoming who you really are, getting in touch with your feminine side, boys, getting in touch with your masculine side, girls, integrating the dark aspects of your personality, coming to terms with all of these things, understand what makes your subconscious tick, understand the multitude of roles you play both to yourself and to the outside world. It is becoming whole. That is, have you ever noticed how, this is a very, very interesting that Jung talked about. Have you ever noticed when you were in class, what was something you used to scribble?
No, for real, dude. And it manifests in small ways where it's like an aspect of this that I really enjoy is in the two essays on analytical psychology. Jung says, or he outlines the danger of the first time you confront your unconscious mind.
Yeah.
Right? Because simply put, Jung has this idea of the self, which has several parts. So there's the ego, which is who you perceive yourself to be, who you conceptualize yourself as. For example, I have this story that I was, born in X city, grew up with these friends. These are the
trials and tribulations I went through.
Yeah. So you have this implotment, you have this idea of yourself and this little narrative that everyone has.
Yeah.
Right?
That's the ego.
That's the ego.
Yeah.
And then within the self, there is the ego and there's also unconscious elements, fragments of things you accumulated unconsciously over the course of your life.
Yeah.
That may be environmentally, through your upbringing, it might be through, and through the antithesis of that, which is what you've rejected in your upbringing.
Yeah.
But you unconsciously still carry with yourself.
Yeah.
Right? And Jung points out that when you, for the first time, realize, and this will happen to a lot of people who go down this path, I certainly had this moment, is that when you first face the unconscious elements of the mind, there's one of two ways, or there's two extremes that people tend towards. And he says they're both godlike extremes. In the sense that there's the first risk, which is of inflation, as in you think that all of a sudden you're very enlightened and you hold the key to the answers of life in a way that other people don't. And that results in a kind of psychological inflation where you start...
That results in a lot of ways of megalomania.
Exactly.
This is the exact psychological process that someone like Hitler must have gone through, to decide that, hey, listen, I'm the arbiter of what is right, what is wrong, what is God's law.
And there's the opposite risk on the other extreme, which is of depression, where you're confronted with
self-annihilation,
the unconscious elements of your mind, and there's just too much for you to take. Right? And Jung then points out there's actually a self-defined strength in he who is being crushed by the unconscious elements, right? And there's actually a denied insecure weakness in he who inflates himself through a confrontation with the unconscious. And I think that when I first began conceptualizing things this way and read about it, is that I, for sure, fortunately for a brief time, had that phenomenon of psychological inflation. Where I was like, oh, I got this shit figured out.
Megalomania.
And it was short, but for some people it lasts like an entire lifetime. And what Jung is trying to show you with individuation, he's trying to present you a lifelong path, right? Not only do you not reach that stage of knowing everything after 20 days, you never reach it.
You never do.
That's not the point at all.
In fact.
Which is why he continually describes it as something rhythmic. That even if it reaches a stasis, the real value creation is when it restarts again and that mold is broken and you progress even further, right? Because every time you erect something in your ego, any sort of ego worship, for example, we started the burger shop and we said that we're going to create X kind of content and we make it a matter of ego. It has to fit this mold. Every construction of the ego also casts its shadow. That's the unintegrated unconscious part of the process that we may have denied. And that we're not acknowledging. And that through a process of individuation, we might better integrate ourselves for the burger.
So just in easy words, like the shadow is basically the dark side of yourself, I don't mean this with any negative connotations. It's basically that side of yourself. Your demons can be part of your shadow, These are things that haunt you. These are things that if you don't address, they could create problems for you. But this is not to say that the shadow is some sort of negative, evil figure. The point is that the shadow is a part of yourself that you have neglected.
It's an unacknowledged part.
It's the unacknowledged part of yourself that you have neglected. So like a neglected child, it's going to throw its toys around, it's going to act up, and it's going to lead your paths to a bit of misery. Unless you address it, unless you address that part of yourself, give it the love and respect it deserves. Like, there's a reason why some of your demons are your demons, You need to not deny their existence. You don't need to compartmentalize them. You need to come to terms with them. You need to speak to them. You need to nurture them. You need to ideally bring your demons on a leash. That is the idea of integrating the shadow, more or less. And make that leashed demon of yours, make that leashed darkness of yours your asset. Make it work within yourself. Make it whole.
Exactly. So, like you said, and you differentiated it perfectly, in a lot of pop Jung, people will say, oh, the ego, the shadow is like the dark side of the ego.
No.
The shadow exists within the self. It is distinct from the ego. It is the unexplored, unintegrated, unconscious part of you.
These are your complexes.
Exactly.
These are your insecurities in a lot of ways.
When you neglect the shadow, when you neglect these parts of you that even without knowing make you whole in a way, that decides whether the shadow presents as a nurtured, fulfilled inner child, let's say, use shorthand, or as a neglected petulant, angry child that is always gnawing at you, that is always kicking and screaming for your attention.
And comes out at the most inopportune times and causes the most destruction then.
And because you're unaware of these unconscious contents in your mind, it is very likely that you won't be able to, number one, accept why or how you've gone wrong in that situation. Because it's simply too painful to confront the underlying factors. Right? If you have angry outbursts, for instance, right? Or if you have the opposite problem of like clamming up when you're faced with conflict, right? Why do these behaviors rarely ever go away in people? It's because it's so difficult to confront whatever underlying unconscious elements were in the shadow that led you to behave that way, that even if after an argument where you were manifestly wrong, someone comes and says to you, even nicely, that, yo, I think that, you took this too extreme in the sense that you were too rude to me, or the other extreme, that you didn't talk to me about it at all, right? And unless you really face those underlying, and these aren't necessarily Freudian, repressed childhood and negative underlying factors.
No.
It could be anything that you've even nurtured in a positive way.
That will also have shadow,
And maybe it's gone too far, right? Maybe you're polite and non-confrontational, and that positive thing has been taken too far and has led to you being clammed up, for instance, right? So it's not, the shadow is not repressed negativity the way the Freudian other is. It's distinct from that.
Absolutely.
And in fact, the way that Jung kind of conceptualizes it is to say that it's like a field of potential. It's shrouded in mystery, but if you delve through it, if you sift through it, you find gold. And it is in a way, and this is I'm paraphrasing, but a direct quote from Jung. He says that shadow is like a tight door, like a tight doorway. Right? So when you first come into contact with the unconscious and begin this lifelong journey, the first thing you have to do is slip through that door, that tight door, and then your journey begins.
Absolutely, yeah. So another thing about the shadow and these dark aspects or the negatively uncontrolled aspects of one personality, right, is that when you read Man and His Symbols, right, Jung has a continued reverence for the primitives because they did not shy away from these things. It's like if in primitive society, if somebody was dealing with or was acting up and stuff, the automatic assumption is, hey, they are possessed. They are under the influence of demons, so to say. They didn't assign an exoteric definition like, hey, this is happening in the material world. They would say that there's something within this person's self that they are not addressing and they need to fix. And then they would go through a little process of whatever ritual that any primitive culture had, is to address that thing of that person within themselves. So they were more spiritually whole. And modern society does not have this because it looks for that answer through rationalized mechanisms, through science, through secular, rational, logical thought. It's like, hey, you know what? Maybe you have a vitamin D deficiency. Maybe I do have a vitamin D deficiency, but maybe I also have a bunch of repressed ideas that are kind of f***ing with me.
So
both can be true.
To go into Man and His Symbols, and it's been a few months since I read it, but there's certain parts that really stuck with me.
Yeah.
So when you talk about the primitives, now.
Yeah.
So Jung constantly says that the primitive society is the undifferentiated whole in the sense that it's completely in touch with its unconscious elements. It's completely in touch with the mystical, transcendental side of things, which civilized man has had beaten, institutionalized out of him.
Yeah.
Right? And there's a particular passage where he says that, someone asks why there are no modern day saints. And he says, no, there's simply no one left who is willing to bend low enough, right? Who is willing to go through that process of humility. Jung doesn't exactly call for self-annihilation, but you kind of get the point, right? Of lowering oneself in front of transcendental forces so that they may possess him.
Yeah.
Right? And he says, but because you've kind of left that behind as a culture and you've gone through a personality differentiation where, yeah, there's a lot of individualism, there's a lot of I have this identity now, but you've lost that undifferentiated whole that you found in primitive societies.
But he does provide us with a mechanism to get back in touch with the spiritual world, with the transcendental world, and that is through one's dreams. He posits that, through dreams, through analyzing one's dreams, there's specific symbology and archetypes that are going to be recurring in one's dreams. Now, here's the thing, to be very, very careful about this, because we don't want to say anything wrong about this. He doesn't say, besides like a few very, very obvious things, there aren't any like collectively reoccurring archetypes and collectively reoccurring symbols and motifs. No. Trust me, this is there. Let me finish my point. Don't interrupt me. Let me finish my point. So he says that individuation, dream analysis is a deeply personal process where symbols and motifs and what you see in your dreams are deeply, deeply individual. So he gives this account of this one woman who was extremely arrogant and was extremely, immune to criticism, did not take anyone, and he was like therapizing her or something, And in her dream, what happened to her was that in her dream, what she sees is that she is in like an event and all of her friends are there, all of her family is there, and they're awaiting at this entrance. And they say to them that, no, sorry, it was an usher. An usher is waiting for them at like this door. And they say beyond this door, all your friends and family lie beyond this door. Then he opens the door and it turns out it's a cow shed and it's just a bunch of cows inside. The funny thing about this is that those cows and those friends and those families that you see in your dream are not actually those people. They're just projections of yourself. So when that usher is telling them, all your friends and family stand beyond this door and it's just a bunch of cows, that is her subconscious, that is her shadow telling her, hey, listen, you're an arrogant cow oaf. You know what I mean? It's a beautiful story. And that's why I'm saying that there are some collectively recurring archetypes like the mother, the father, the philosopher's stone.
I'll be very specific.
Dream analysis is extremely individual.
Absolutely. Yeah. But there's one change I'll make in that.
Yeah.
Which is illustrated, I've read that story.
Yeah.
Which is illustrated through another story, which he talks about a little girl, and it's deeply tragic. I think she's like 5 or 6 years old.
Yeah.
And she has these deeply religious dreams.
Yeah.
Where she's seeing angels, she's seeing Jesus, she's seeing levels of hell, right? Angels, all of these images, right? This girl had no particularly religious upbringing. She had no way of knowing any of these things.
Yeah.
Right? And this example, in my mind, served to illustrate two things, and it's used in the book as well. One, it made me see it in a way that there is some truly transcendent supernatural element to our archetypes. But two, the point made in the book is the archetypes are eternal. The exact way they manifest are different. Right?
Yeah,
so, for example,
let me specify. Motifs and symbols don't mean the same thing.
Yeah, exactly.
People. So what I see in my dream, we can both be seeing a cow, but they mean very, very different things to us. You know what I mean? They're different symbols, different motifs that manifest themselves differently, person to person. It's a deep. That's why you can't institutionalize Jung, because it's so deeply personal.
Exactly. But the institutionalized constants of certain archetypes are still there. For
I'm not denying that. Yeah.
So, for example, the tree of life archetype, or the the wise mother, or any of these, may manifest in completely different ways.
Yeah.
As different symbols, but there are those certain stable archetypes that are everywhere, that are common. And in fact, he uses that then
the circle being one of the greatest ones.
And then he because the circle is still a physical manifestation of something, right? He might say that the circle
is the Ouroboros, the snake eating its own tail.
Yeah, and that for a certain culture and for certain people, the ideas that the circle represents are manifested through that particular circle, and that they might manifest as another symbol.
But they pretty much consistently do, like the circle in specific does consistently symbolize wholeness. Like if you look like Buddhist.
No, sure, I'm not lying that at all. That's not. But for example, how does Jung advance the argument that, so this is very clear in the analytical essays and in Man and the Symbols, he says that there's a reason you can make the argument that all of these uncontacted tribes and civilizations which have never been in contact with each other have certain stable archetypes in their dreams.
Absolutely.
They may, and your example actually fits perfectly, that the cow may represent a certain kind of archetype, right?
Yeah.
In the other dream, the tree of life, as it's imagined biblically, may represent a certain type of archetype, but that archetype across time, across nations, will still be one.
Yeah.
That's why he has stable categories.
But symbols and motifs are different. Yeah, no, I agree with you there. I mean, it doesn't agree on that fact.
Yeah.
I was just trying to clarify.
No, I got it. I knew the form of your argument was correct. I was just trying to, for the purposes of the viewers.
Linguistics and semantics are important when it comes to this stuff because there's so much room for misinterpretation. It's good you brought it up.
Bro, even things like, bro, when you first get into it, like, bro, okay, self, ego, what's the difference? Like,
And the linguistics, the semantics are important, guys, with this stuff.
And genuinely, and people are like, oh, use simple words. It's like, man, these systems.
I'm trying my best to simplify this stuff, bro.
These systems, like, self and ego are pretty simple words.
Yeah.
But if someone's, Jung is almost like an early systems thinker.
Yeah.
In the complexity and the nodes that he has in his entire system.
Yeah.
Right? And in order to familiarize and operate that system, you will have to put in some effort. Everyone can't spoon feed you a simple video.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's tough.
I can't explain this stuff in a bunch of pictures. Even though we really try to add pictures to illustrate a point, sometimes it's you have to explain.
And you can go to pop psychology on YouTube and you can watch that. Right?
Honestly, it's a good place to start.
It's a good place to start.
I'm not demeaning it. Yeah.
That's only going to get you so far. And then it's going to give you, whatever Instagram's latest interpretation of Carl Jung is.
Perhaps, which might be us. Who knows? Yeah. So coming back to it with dreams and stuff. So another thing he says about dreams, right? If you see a character in the dream, if you see, let's say, a woman who resembles your loved one in a dream, that person that you're seeing in the dream is never that person in of themselves. It's a projection of your own part of yourself in the dream, So there was this one story, and once again, that he told about this man who was having a dream about his wife, and his wife was a very, very, trad woman, or very, very proper woman, but in his dreams, she appeared as a bit of a degenerate type character. Yeah.
I remember.
But the point of her appearing as a degenerate type character was a projection of his own mind onto her, And this is why sometimes people see a dream and they get upset with the person. But no, what that dream is telling you, that wife appearing as a degenerate character is a degenerate part of yourself that is being projected onto her. So all these different people that you see in your dreams, if you are seeing a friend of yours, if you are seeing a loved one, if you are seeing even a cow or a sheep, these are all becoming projections of your own self.
It's also very
it's got nothing to do with those people in of themselves. It's got everything to do with different shadows and different ideas you hold internally about yourself that you're projecting on those people.
It's also particularly common with parent dreams and with people who perceive themselves as victims of bad parenting.
Yeah.
It is a very common phenomena for them to observe their mother or their father engaging with them in that negative way. Say they had an abusive parent.
Yeah.
It's common for people to see dreams in which the parent is engaging in a negative way towards them.
Yeah.
Right? This is not to say that people aren't mistreated or that pain is not valid. But very often, those dreams are then interpreted as you're seeing the worst parts that you've inherited from your mother or father being projected onto them in that dream.
Yeah.
So, for example, if you've got a parent who's snarky, mean, and you're also snarky and mean, you will particularly hate that thing about them, while most likely being a bit unaware of it yourself.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
And you'll see it.
Can't be true. Yeah.
You'll see it in a dream where that trait of your parent that you so resent is being manifested in an extreme way by them towards you.
Yeah.
Right? And you'll think, yeah, this is my childhood trauma acting up. They shouldn't have done this to me. And in reality, it is just a projection of the worst thing that you have inherited from them. And your mind is trying to reach psychological wholeness by telling you that, you have this trait face up to it. In that dream, you are literally facing up to it.
Yeah.
And you're being told, this is how it feels, stop being like that.
Yeah. And another thing that he even mentioned in Man and His Symbols, right, is that these dreams that you see, the characters that you see are almost exclusively representations of yourself, number one. Number two, if you think that there is a positive message to be drawn from this dream, like a self-congratulatory message, or it's like, hey, if you walk out of a dream thinking, hey, I'm doing so well, this is what my dream is telling me, you got it wrong.
Very, very.
You got it f***ing wrong. There's a riddle. Yeah. There's a riddle right here. He told another story about this king in Greece. He received a dream about if he crosses a river, he will destroy a great kingdom.
And so it's his own kingdom.
So yeah,
I remember that.
Thinking in his brain, okay, if I cross this river, I'm going to go to that kingdom and I'm going to take over them and I'm going to be this great, incredible king.
I remember that.
It was a self-congratulatory interpretation that he took of that dream. And turns out he got utterly annihilated. And it was actually his own kingdom that burned down when he crossed that river, you know? So another rule of thumb when it comes to the dream analysis is that if it is too self-congratulatory, if it is making you feel too happy, there's a riddle.
If it's causing psychological inflation.
If it's causing psychological inflation, there's a riddle. Your shadow is telling you something, and sometimes your shadow appears to you in riddles, and it is a trickster.
And that is exactly why Jung consistently says that this is the compensatory function of the psyche.
Yeah.
That the shadow serves to compensate for what you're missing and what you're unaware of that you're missing. And when you finally face up to the shadow and you squeeze through that door, right, that you can conceptualize as the beginning of your psychological rigidity, your ego's rigidity, your hard-fought conceptions, stale conceptions of who you are, that is actually stopping you from becoming who you're meant to be.
Yeah.
That part of the ego begins to disintegrate and becomes more susceptible in a positive way to that long spiritual transcendental journey that will get you to the nearer to the never-ending journey towards the promised land.
Towards the enlightenment.
Yeah. And so, you know, you start out with the undifferentiated ego and the undifferentiated self, rather, and then
shadow dream analysis.
You get into the the shadow begins to disintegrate or at least soften.
Integrated into the self.
That's the last stage. What I mean by disintegration here is kind of different. Let me change the word.
Okay.
Right? Is that, say you face up to it and just use the metaphor, you squeeze through the door.
Yeah.
And your journey begins. Right? And then the next stage, as described in, is the contrasexual figure. The contrasexual figure, which is the anima or the animus, which then you use as a mechanism to, or is...
Get in touch with your masculine or feminine side. So every male has a feminine side, which is the anima. And every woman has a masculine side, which is the animus. And these are basically aspects of the other gender that we all carry within ourselves. It's like, you know, a man does not have to only be logical, rational, and, you know, let's say hard. There's a feminine side to every man, which ideally, which is ideally creative, which is ideally caring, which is ideally, you know, empathetic, you know. But in unexamined and an unintegrated anima, it can manifest itself in a very, very negative way with an insecurity in like a male, which is that, you know, your anima could be telling you to lash out, to freak out, to be hysterical, which are normally considered to be, you know, feminine traits, to be jealous, you know,
just to clarify,
negative aspects of femininity.
Exactly. So what are traditionally considered as the most negative aspects of femininity will manifest in you unless
in the most macho of guys, unless you integrate
unless you integrate the most positive aspects of femininity, which are the, you know, and It's actually, this is where pop psychology to some extent gets it right.
Yeah.
Where it's like, yeah, it is being in touch with your feelings.
Get in touch with your feminine
Yeah,
side. Yeah, and
yeah.
Jung says it, and Jung is as like Chad code as it gets.
Yeah.
But yeah,
And
yeah.
the same thing with females.
Yeah.
May manifest as, okay, the traditional view is that you're supposed to be, soft, emotional, empathetic, etc. But Jung says, no, you can't just be that.
You have to have the masculine side as well.
Integrate the best aspects of the masculine side, which then would be considered
strong, logical, have convictions, fight for what they believe in, all of
And
these
if
things.
anyone's objection to this is, you're saying men are logical and women are emotional. We're not trying to say that. We're trying to say that people.
We're explaining Jung's framework to you.
No. The general statement that we're making is that people need to have both of these traits. And men need to have both of them, and women need to have both of them.
Yeah.
What are the proportions? I don't know. It varies for everyone. That's what individuation is.
Yeah.
Right? That's kind of the point.
Yeah.
But this is to say that, of course, you're hardwired for certain tendencies as a male, hardwired for certain tendencies as a female, and your psychological wholeness will only come with a healthy relationship with the best parts of the other sex.
Yeah, and here's the thing, when we look at it in today's world, right, what are the issues that, gender wars have with each other? It's the guys are going to tell the girls that you guys are too masculine, you guys are too sexualized, you guys are too brutish, you guys aren't classical women, and the women are going to tell the guys like, hey, you guys are too feminine, you guys are too bitchy, you guys are too jealous, you guys are all these things. And these are basically the Jungian manifestations, like,
all that
exemplified of like men and women having unintegrated animas and animuses. You know what I mean? So it is not to say that, modern men are a certain way or modern women are a certain way, but the complaints that modern women have of modern men and modern men have of modern women, he diagnosed it like 70, 80 years ago, and it is quite literally the embodiment of the negative aspects of an anima and an animus in the contrasexual.
And it's like, exactly.
Thing.
And it's like, dude, people who say that, and I really hope this is done and dusted in popular culture, but the proper tabula rasa approach where it's like, no, actually, everything is affected onto you by society. It's like, man, there can be no greater proof of a stable feminine and a stable masculine than their interaction inside the Jungian framework.
Yeah.
Where, like you said, several decades on, he's basically predicted on a cultural level of what problematic men and problematic women are going to be like.
Absolutely. He basically hit the nail on the head. And here's the thing. Jung is not saying, hey, have strict gender role, have strict male-female roles. He's literally telling the guys, start wearing a bit more pink. And he's literally telling the girls, start keeping a mohawk. In a lot of ways, you know what I mean? That's what he's kind of doing.
But yeah, and it's really interesting where then the suggestion that the anima or the animus, depending on whether it's a man or a woman, is then a template onto which the eternal archetypes can also be mapped on.
Mm-hmm.
And that it is that the conscious sexual part of yourself is what you use to then get in touch with the broader framework of archetypes.
Yeah.
And you use it to descend into the trickiest parts of the unconscious and then begin integrating them. And I'm kind of speed running through it, but at the end of that is where you find some sort of integration.
Yeah.
Right? And this is on an individual level and on a social level as well, on a civilizational world level as well. So even a man, and the symbols, you might remember this part where he talks about the post-war world and says that the Western world now wears the garb of human rights speak because it's come up with the UN. It speaks it dons the garb of economic progressivism through the Bretton Woods system, and it's basically birthed itself this entire welter of civilizational systems that masks the ulterior motives that it still has in its unconscious mind, which is still the domination of the world. So when it looks at the USSR, of course there's a hatred, because the USSR presents that post-war West with all the worst aspects of itself, right? They ignore the good in the USSR and they say they've got this dominating will to rule the world, and it makes them so f***ing mad. They're seething. You've got McCarthy.
They're egalitarian.
Because just because of that, right? So you ignore all of those things. You see and you have 70 years of propaganda against the USSR and then Russia.
Yeah.
And every single thing that they're saying about that civilization can be mapped on exactly back onto the West.
Yeah.
Ukraine is kind of a prime example.
Yeah.
You're saying you were the aggressor, you were evil, you were a terrorist, and then you provoke a war yourself and you cause a shit show in Ukraine, which now the Ukrainian people are paying an arm and a leg.
Absolutely. And so what the insinuation we're getting over here is that these consciousness is not just crystallized on individual levels, but civilizations have consciousness. Millennia of history have their own consciousness and their own histories to tell and their own psychological evolution that are going on.
And if you look at individuation as a recursive process, now, when we talked about land, we were like, oh, techno-capital.
Yeah.
The autonomous, mindless, efficiency-based advance of capitalism and AI is a recursive process, and it learns, say, the way a computer learns in binary code or whatever, machining intelligence. The same way individuation is a conscious, transcendental process in which there's also a lifelong recursive process, right? Except you're more selective. You're not selecting for efficiency, you're selecting for whatever your vision of positivity or achievement are, right? And so that doesn't just happen on an individual level. That happens on a civilizational scale.
Absolutely.
And it also happens on a cross-individual and civilizational scale.
Yeah.
Which is then, the hero or the creative man's arc.
Yeah.
Right? And, okay, I love talking about this in the context of Allama Iqbal in particular.
Yeah.
Right? You see, when Allama Iqbal comes to the forefront, you see a Muslim world steeped in the malaise of colonialism. You see a Muslim world that is intellectually stagnant. We don't even have at that point, and unfortunately still, the terminology you would need to contend with imperialism, right? You don't even have it in your languages. This guy breaks onto the scene. And in the Jungian process, the process would go something like the creative or the hero, he gains prestige the moment he breaks away from the crowd and the crowd recognizes he has something different to offer, which you could say is the stage in which Iqbal starts writing in all these pamphlets. Iqbal starts writing this poetry that begins to reach the masses and invoke a kind of Muslim consciousness across the subcontinent. And then he evolves into a national figure. You can say that the culmination, the moment which Jung calls universal recognition, is when Pakistan adopts him as their ideological forefather and national poet, right? And Jung says actually that moment of universal recognition is actually not good, because that's the moment in which a tense, hot force like the ideology of Iqbal that's fighting this recursive battle for so long becomes dead dogma. It becomes cold, it becomes institutionalized, it becomes something you read about in textbooks. Say the struggle of Jinnah is reduced to unity, faith, and discipline. Not that those aren't values, but they become textbook. They become stale. And they lose the revolutionary hot fervor that they had in their time, right? And so people allege this about Iqbal, that he's been captured by institutions, he's been captured by the powers that be. But I think there couldn't be a more reductionist take. I think Iqbal is alive and kicking ass. And I'll tell you exactly how. You have one strand of Iqbal that the Pakistani state has captured, I think it's done good to capture that. It's good for national unity that we have a figure that represents our civilization that way. But it's still just one strand of Iqbal, right? The hot forces of his thought are still very much active. The most Sufi inclined orders today will quote Iqbal. The most legalist will. Ali Shariati operationalized Iqbal's thinking in the Iranian Revolution. Not to say that he did it for good or for worse. The point is he still did it. The breadth that he has across Sufi orders, sects in the entire Muslim world shows that fragmentation, which is necessary after someone has been institutionalized and turned into dead dogma, is very much alive and well for Iqbal. And in my opinion, and because I'm just like a kind of a low IQ Iqbal devotee, to be really honest, the fate of this man and his thought is going to be so much greater than any of us can conceptualize right now. And I think that any future in which there's some kind of Muslim renaissance across the Islamic world, where all these values that Iqbal talked about are brought back with a revolutionary fervor, I think that Iqbalian thought will impose itself not just on the Muslims of the subcontinent, but across the Arab world. And the future...
The moment is coming, baby.
Bro, the future is one where we export revolutionary fervor for the reclamation of our values as opposed to importing it from, say, in the past, Persian thinkers and Arab thinkers. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Iqbal wouldn't have existed without those people.
Yeah.
Right? But his time is yet to come.
Yeah.
And when it comes, it is going to be glorious. Mark my words, write the date down. It's going to happen.
Yeah, that's a very, very interesting idea. And tough to disagree with a lot of it, where we haven't explored a lot of his themes well enough. It's just been like, they've been Che Guevara into like nice t-shirts and like that one nice picture of him, you know what I mean? So
the thinker,
he's got an airport named after him. That's kind of based, but we need more than that out of him.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so this cycle that Jung points out for the creative or the heroic man, where he first gains prestige, which is his differentiation from the collective conscious of his society. And then he is propelled through the ranks and in time becomes myth because of the powers of his ideas or of his works. Becomes dead dogma. And that happens that how it happens is once you gain universal recognition, you then recede or regress into the mass. You become the new orthodoxy. You were a rebel only for a certain time. You broke the old mold, but now you are a mold again. And what societies tend to do, Jung argues, is you take the individuation of a great man, say the process which played out in someone like Iqbal, that allowed him to reach these incredible heights in everything he did, and major axiomatic conclusions about our civilization. That you take the journey, the struggle, the individuation of a man, and that society takes it off him as a mask and wears it as a persona. So we were talking about earlier. For a society like Pakistan, for example, that prizes religion, that prizes, having a Muslim identity. When you expropriate the toil and the effort of someone like Iqbal, and you wear the simplified mask, where he's reduced to a few couplets, and one day a year...
Tradwification of Iqbal.
Yeah, you ensnare him in this institutionalized version of himself, you're deadening, you're softening the impact that he could really have on you as a society, and you're using him as a substitute for your own journey. That's why I said that, you're taking his individuation and you're wearing it as your own mask, as your outward
Very
person.
interesting idea what you just said, because what just dawned on me is that a lot of societies who have tried to do this, where it's try to wear the mask of one great thinker as a substitute for their entire world building, have more often than not ended in ruin. The USSR, when Marxist thought, for instance,
Yeah.
that became Marxism, to Marxist Stalinism, Marxist Leninism, Marxist Trotskyism, etc., etc. And the societies that avoided this and did not base their entire national identity on a single thinker, but rather an amalgamation of them. Let's say the British during the Industrial Revolution, where you have a number of thinkers, a number of ideas playing with each other to create something hot. Same thing can be said about, like, Napoleon's France and like the French Revolution to Napoleon's France and all that stuff.
But as a counterweight, I would say that number of thinkers.
We see this in like Cuba, Fidel Castro and Che Guevara's Cuba, where it's like the extreme veneration of one thinker but leads to this destructive.
I think the number of thinkers matters, but what's more important in the Jungian framework is, even if it's just one thinker, is a continual reinterpretation of that thinker. So
absolutely,
for example, the counter
China does this.
The counter exactly.
Yeah.
So the counter with
USSR to Jiang Zemin to Xi Jinping.
So the counter to saying that's they froze Marx and Stalinist Russia.
Yeah.
Right, and that's why they declined. And the glasnost and everything came way too late.
Yeah.
Is that China took its idols by the neck and said, I will use from you what I want, and I will
keep reinterpreting you.
Exactly. And that's what kept the revolutionary fervor hot, and it still does to this day.
Isn't it kind of ijtihad in a way?
100%.
It's a form of ijtihad.
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly
fascinating.
What it is. That's exactly
it's a great idea.
So that reinterpretation, right? And people will just view this as this time-based cyclical thing where now that we have TVs or now that we have AI, we need a new ruling on, and we need a new process of ijtihad on how to adapt to this technology. Absolutely, that's a part of it, right? But in general, apart from all technologies and material factors, there is a certain risk that which you see in Thus Spoke Zarathustra. That when Zarathustra comes down to the market and preaches, the people misunderstand what he's saying, right? And you see this again on a mass level, people expropriating myth and defining XYZ thinkers' thought to their own end, right? And the importance of a gadfly, a disruptor, to come a generation later and say, you've taken this great person who had this, say, liberationist or say altruistic angle to them, and you've put them in this institutional box to suit your own ends. That timeless, formless, purely dialectical process is something that is also just purely ijtihad-like. And it's like another, we've gone quite maybe a bit meta with this, but to take a relatable example, take Eminem.
Okay,
right? Eminem, when he was in the late 90s with songs like Kim and that were very controversial, he was a symbol for the rebellious youth of the time.
Yeah,
and not in the least because he's a white boy expropriating black culture and just, he doesn't give a shit about anyone, and he's gonna, glorify violence. And so he became a symbol for rebellion. You see, 20 years later, this washed up, sorry excuse for what Eminem used to represent, who parrots like Saturday Night Live kind of commentary and Democratic Party tropes, right? And you're like, what happened was, you start out as this firebrand entertainer, you have a very unique personality, which is why you gain your prestige and differentiation from the crowd. Then Eminem becomes so big that he is an institution.
And then big music comes along.
And then big music comes and hijacks Eminem. And then he fades into the collective. He regresses into the collective and he becomes the new orthodox.
He becomes the deterritorialization things that he did become reterritorialized by the system, and they become cold.
And you become the new orthodoxy, and you become boring, and you're no longer like your version of what's rebellious is like the establishment's narrative of what's rebellious, right? So, and then, yeah, you know, that's kind of the death of Eminem as a revolutionary force in popular culture, right? And you see this with, it's a classical arc, bro. PR campaigns, PR teams are literally the materialization of this phenomenon, where it's like you've got all these actors, actresses, models, whatever, all these famous people who come in as with unique personalities, right? And then if you ask
Then
any
they're
of them,
institutionalized.
bro, you ask any of them any question about anything meaningful, and then all give you the same PR-driven answers. That is them regressing into the collective conscious.
So what do we think about Kanye West in that case, who was the hot power, kind of avoided institutionalization the entire time, and the second he was actually getting close to being institutionalized through Yeezy and Adidas and all of this other stuff, he goes batshit insane. What do you think?
Literally,
That's dissidence in a way.
he's Zarathustra, bro.
He's Zarathustra.
Literally.
There's a good argument.
Yeah.
There's a good argument. Honestly, I was under. I growing up, I was a big Kanye fan, and then his antics. I'm like, bro, I'm kind of done with this. This is not even entertaining anymore. But this analysis that you just gave me a different level of perspective on his entire journey. Maybe he is Zarathustra.
No, bro, in the sense that, look, and this is not, I'm not saying everything Kanye has done is good.
Yeah, that's not what I'm saying.
Advocate for all of his
Absolutely
ideas.
not.
There's some weird stuff in there. But it's to say that first you come out, you become a massive star, right? In everything from music to fashion. And then you start getting these institutionalized deals. But then you're like, you know, I'm being like, this is kind of a red herring, because, you know, he talks about, I wanted a meeting with Jamie Dimon. He wouldn't give me a meeting. And then I basically said, you know? So he has this tendency of being like, I want to become the power, or he had this tendency in the middle of being like, I want to be the powers that be.
Yeah.
And then he realized that someone as, you know, riddled with the kind of iconoclastic energy he has will never be accepted into the establishment fold, right? He simply can't exist there. He's too iterative. He's too constantly on maybe the individuation thing, that he's never going to be drawn in. So in the end, he kind of goes like, I'm going to Wyoming to make an album. I don't need any of you. I'm going to make a ranch and I'm going to live there. I'm going to, you know, do Sunday service in the middle of the desert.
Honestly,
this
gives a different level of perspective one can cast over his continuous self-sabotage. What if this continuous self-sabotage was in a way to retain that hot creative energy? Because every time I am casted out and I need to claw my way back in, and how do I do that? By one-upping myself last time. Because it's like 808, it's a heartbreak, great album. The Taylor Swift thing happens, okay, he's blacklisted, then he comes out with maybe the best album of the 21st century, Dark Fantasy.
Incredible.
Yeah, and then he is once again institutionalized. This is Jesus era. He starts becoming edgy again, but his edginess is only making him even more institutionalized. So what does he do? He goes batshit insane. Wyoming, baby. Wyoming arc.
This is actually the Jungian prestige process personified, because it's stasis. Kanye differentiates himself.
Yeah.
Becomes myth, gets shot down, then begins the prestige process again.
He's Zarathustra. This is basically Zarathustra.
Yeah. Yeah.
Fascinating. Yeah. So now, like, okay, coming full circle with it, right? I think the moral of everything that we're talking about is that we are trying to present to you all and to ourselves in a lot of ways a third path. The third path is Jung's paths of individuation. The beauty of Jung's paths of individuation is ultimately that is deeply personal. It doesn't require any institutional support. It doesn't require you to spend $100 per hour of therapy. It doesn't require anything other than the willingness of yourself to sit with your own thoughts and demons, wrestle with them, and come out a better person. It just requires you to wrestle with the paradoxes in your mind and come out a better person. And it's not an easy thing. Maybe I'm simplifying it. It's not an easy thing at all, but it provides a self-reliant, innovative method for enlightenment ad infinitum. You know
And the beautiful part is that it's outward looking and collaborative in the sense that obviously it's mediated every day by how you interact with people.
Yeah, it's a constant journey.
And someone who's in a particularly tough place might also approach a Jungian practitioner or a therapist. That
Of course, yeah.
But even they are simply guiding you back into yourself and encouraging you to carry out shadow work, right?
Yeah.
Or to engage with your dreams.
Yeah.
And I was actually reading the other day, and you know, the ultimate proof that Jungian practitioners really do lean on that side is the average treatment time for a Jungian practitioner was something like 4 to 6 years when I looked it up. And for, say, cognitive behavioral therapy, it'll be 1 year, 2 years. You know, a lot of people will be in and out.
Yeah.
And whereas cognitive behavioral therapy is at times ineffective and at times very effective for, say, immediate symptoms, people who really want to individuate in the long run over several years and affect long-term stable personality changes.
Yeah, become who you want to be.
Really change, and you know, not just firefight to get out of a crisis. Those people are opting for Jungian therapy.
Yeah.
And again,
foundation building, base building, long-term stuff.
And this is not to say that unless you're facing problems, you should go to either. This is just to say that you actually can, if you're not facing a crisis, long-term start working on yourself and get these principles. And look, people are gonna, like, one objection I would have to this actually would be like, if you're saying this is the key to live a better life, I already have a moral system in place. Say I'm a religious person, I already have a moral system in place. Am I accepting this person as like a prophet or a someone that has all the answers? No. And Jung doesn't even claim to be that, right? And the way at least I conceptualized it in myself was that when I read about him and began on my own journey, or at least began conceptualizing my journey this way, was I remember last year I went for Hajj, and then after that, everything was kind of up in the air. And I was like, I need to reform. And this just gave me a language and a framework in how I could tackle that, and specifically in the age of modernity, right? So I think that's what it is. And it has that one limitation where Jung's not trying to be your prophet. He's not trying to be like some
He's not telling you
force.
any solution. He tells you your solution is you need to find it yourself. Here are a bunch of tools. Here's a hammer. Here's a nail. Figure it out yourself. That's what he does. But he gives you an honest hammer and an honest nail.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And in fact, he's, you know, we kept talking about like the hero or the creative man's arc. He consistently talks throughout his books about his fear of being turned into a be-all, end-all guru who has all the answers.
Yeah.
Right? His fear of being mythologized and institutionalized.
Absolutely.
So the takeaway is again this. My instruction to anyone on Jung, as young as my knowledge about him is simply engage with it.
Yeah.
Don't take my description of him for granted.
Yeah.
Right?
And my Jungian process is going to be different to your Jungian process.
Exactly. And you know, this is very different from the, you know,
what are your symptoms? Let me check. I'm going to diagnose you with XYZ antidepressant approach.
That on one hand, and also the other approach which is like, you know, blank slate, everyone's completely different. It's like, no, Jung says, you've got the timeless archetypes, but they manifest differently for everybody.
Yeah.
Right? So there's a stable vision of what a human psyche is, what populates the unconscious mind, and the typical presentations of all symptoms. So for example, Jung says in a kind of uncharacteristic way, you know, one quality patient is more important to me than 10 low quality ones. And what he meant by a quality patient is someone, for example, who displays an extreme of a personality, which is, say, schizophrenia or a borderline, right? Because that helps him determine what the typical limits of human behavior are. So those constants are taken into account, and those constants interact with an individual's unique journey. And that's the balance of generalized human experience and then the arc that we were talking about earlier, the arc that everyone has and deserves to have, deserves to actually build in their mind. And it is through that interaction that you, in the long run, get into the endless rhythm of individuation.